Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. We got a great crowd, and my name is Kobe. I'm the maybe unwilling leader here. I don't know, but I'm the one that leads the group here. Great you can make it out tonight. A couple of announcements before we turn it over to Alan. Alan is our resident expert on a number of things, including communication. So he's going to be our main speaker tonight. Before we get started, hopefully most people got notes. I think we did run out at the back table, so maybe a couple of you didn't get it. I'll give away my copy here as soon as I finish referencing them. But the first page of their notes there is just kind of a reminder about the upcoming announcements and stuff. We do currently meet here on the second Friday of every month. And so we'll be here obviously this month. Next month, April, we're going to be meeting on the 14th, which is the second Friday at 6 o'clock right here. And Carol, is already standing back there. Carol is going to be our speaker. She's going to talk about canning. And canning, in my opinion, is extremely important. It's part of preserving food. And I know people do a lot of different ways of preserving food. You can do canning, you can do salting, you can do smoking, you can do dehydrating, freeze drying. There's all kinds of things. And she does just about all that. But next month specifically, we're going to talk about canning because it's one of the easier things to do. Here's why I think even if you're not planning on going home and canning right now, I think it's a really important skill to have when it all hits the fan. Okay? If you plant a garden and you need to be able to preserve that food, if you kill a deer, you need to be able to preserve that. And if you don't have a freezer or a refrigerator or other ways of preserving that, canning is one of those great ways to do that. And so I encourage you, even if you're not planning on going home and canning immediately, come and learn how to do it. Learn that skill. And that's what we're going to be talking about next month. Even for me, I have learned canning. I've learned pressure canning and water bath canning, and I have the stuff to do it, even though I don't regularly can food. But I think it's an important skill to learn. So that's next month's topic. The topics for the rest of the year, May, June, July, August, September, and October, November, and December, we haven't determined yet. So if you've got an idea that something you would like to learn about, or something that you would like to teach, please come see me after the meeting. I would love to talk to you as we schedule out the remainder of the year. Next announcement, Bug Out Camp for 2023. We did our first Bug Out Camp last September. Great success. And we're trying to build upon that. So again, this coming September, the dates are the 14th through the 17th. That's a Thursday through Sunday. Now, you don't have to stay all of those dates. You can just come down for the day. You can stay one night or 2 nights, whatever you want to do. But it's Ozarks Bug Out Camp. It's on our Facebook page and on our Preppernet page. But it's at Roaring River State Park, which is just a little over an hour away down in Cassville. It's a beautiful setting. They've got about 180 camping spots there, and they are over halfway booked. They're about 60% booked last night. So if you are interested in going to the Ozarks Bug Out Camp with us, the several days of teaching, learning, getting to know other people that are like-minded, it's a great time to test your bug out bag if you want, or just show up and sleep in a camper or a tent, or they even have hotel rooms, whatever you want to do. Come join us. I highly encourage you to go ahead and put your reservation in. You can go ahead and reserve that spot through the state park system. And if you have to cancel, all you lose, if you cancel at least 30 days in advance, all you lose is your $6 reservation fee. So if you even think you might want to come, go ahead and get your reservation in. That way they don't fill up. They will fill up before the event, so make sure you get that done. I want to talk just 1 second, the pre-meeting activity, kind of leading into what Alan's going to talk about. And I know he's going to talk about this a little bit too, but let's talk about it together as a group for a second. The question it says here on your notes is, who would you want to talk to in the end of the world as you know it, or as we know it, event? That's what that word means, by the way. The end of the world as we know it. Okay? So everything changes. You know, China drops a nuke, an EMP, the government collapses, our financial system collapses, whatever happens, and life as we know it is totally different. We don't have a cell phone, we don't have internet, all that stuff. Who would you want to talk to? I know a lot of people I don't want to talk to, I can tell you that much, okay? But who do you want to talk to? That's an actual question. Close family. Jesus. Kids.
Anybody that's prepping.
Anybody that's prepping, okay? Even the bad people that are prepping?
Well,
With bad motives? Okay, maybe just the good people prepping. Okay. You know, just to kind of give you an idea of what my thinking on the subject is, I want to talk with, obviously, my family. Of course, I'm hoping my family is able to come be with me. So hopefully communicating with them is going to be pretty easy. But as we do things around the house, around the property, in the area of where we're bugging out to, I want to be able to keep in communication with them. Okay? Also, kind of part of my home plan is to have a mutual assistance group, a group of people nearby me who are friendly, known to be friendly, known to have some of their own supplies, and people who will have my back when I need someone to have my back. And I've got their back when they need someone to have their back. And those are people, I look for people within a 5-mile radius. And so I want something that allows me to potentially communicate with those people when I need them. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for in communications. I will readily admit that is one of my weak spots. I think I'm losing my battery here. I'm about to shut up, so I'll just keep going. But that's one of my weak spots. It's one of the reasons I'm learning. So I appreciate Alan coming to do this. For those of you who brought radios, there was a long line of people that brought radios, which is great. Alan will be sticking around afterwards for a few minutes to continue programming. Maybe next month we can also bring that back and continue programming. Also, it looks like many of you bought the radios off of one of the links that we provided. Thank you for doing that. And sorry, his programming right now doesn't work on those. That includes the radios that I bought. So there's so many different types of radios, and that link happened to be a knockoff link that doesn't actually have a software that we can program right now. We're going to work on that, so maybe next month. But you can still program those radios using the instructions in them. It's just maybe not quite as easy as him instantly uploading some frequencies. Anyway, thanks again for coming tonight. Well, I'll talk to you again at the end, but now we're going to introduce Alan. And Alan's going to come talk to us about radios and communications.
Test 1, 2. Everybody hear me okay?
Okay, got 2 sets of notes if someone wants them.
Yep.
There's 1, there's 2, okay.
Well, I assume everybody's had a chance to look at this for a minute. My one public speaking class I took a number of years ago said that you're supposed to tell a little bit about yourselves to lend a little credibility. My wife says that with missing teeth I look like Bubba and not very credible. Anyhow, I've been a ham for a long time. I'm retired Navy, most of the time reserves. CB, technically I'm a Vietnam vet, but I never set foot in the country. I just floated around in Haiphong Harbor minesweeping and clearing mines at the end of the war. I'm a graduate from University of Missouri-Rolla. It used to be at UMR, now it's MST, I think. Or it's always UMR to me. And I'm a retired registered professional engineer. I had to get my PE when I worked for City Utilities years ago. And been prepping since the 80s. I read a couple of Howard Ruff's books back in the 80s, How to Prosper During the Coming Hard Years or something like that, and had me convinced that our economy was a house of cards and it was the collapse was not only certain, but it was imminent. Well, hasn't happened yet. Anyhow, it was a nice presentation. Show of hands, how many people think that there's no possibility of the grid going down during your remaining lifetime? Anybody? I say, oh, you do? Bye-bye. There's really no point in being here if you think that the grid can't possibly go down, because as long as the grid's up and times are normal, You can communicate with anybody you want with one of these, pretty much any time. But what if the grid does go down? The things to consider: who might you want or need to communicate with? Where would they be located? How far away? And what are you willing to do to enable to have communications if there's a grid down situation? And what are they willing to do? Because a lot of that answers to those questions clarify what equipment you might need. On the who you might want to communicate with, if the poops hit the fan, you might want to be able to talk to your neighbors, friends and family, which when I say neighbors, fairly close into wherever you live. Friends and family, maybe across town, maybe across the country, maybe in another continent. You might want to talk to other like-minded folks, like maybe some folks in here. And then you might want to talk to, if you're out in a rural homestead and you circle the wagons and you've got some friends to come out and help you defend it. Maybe you've got a listening post, observation post that somebody's manned it, and you need to talk to them. Maybe there's a patrol out patrolling the perimeter of the property. Maybe you're bugging out, you're going from wherever you are in the city to bug out to your bug out location, and you're in a convoy, and you might need to communicate between vehicles and convoy, or caravan going somewhere. Or your mutual assistance group, if you have a homestead, I kind of coined that term HAG, homestead augmentation group, if you got other people to come out to your homestead, if and when the poop hits the fan. Whatever group you might have, tribe, team, basically just different terms for kind of sort of the similar things. Where would they be? How far away? These are kind of my classifications. Short range, a mile more or less, depending on how hilly the terrain is. If you're out real flat terrain out in the desert, what will get you maybe half a mile in the Missouri Ozarks hilly woods might get you 5 miles out in the desert. It might get you 20 miles if you're in the mountains, from mountaintop to mountaintop. Intermediate range, 0 to 20 plus long, and then regional up to 500 miles, and then global, talk to somebody, communicate with somebody around the world. What are you and they willing to do? The first, it's kind of from things that are cheapest and easiest all the way down to most expensive and requires more time. Acquire non-licensed portable handheld two-way radios. That would be, somebody had some of the FRS type radios. They sell them like in blister packs sometimes at the big box stores. FRS and GMRS, they're non-licensed. These radios here acquire licensed two-way radios, but without a license. This is something I kind of discovered. You can get these for $9 a piece if you buy 20 of them at a time. This is the Baofeng BF888S. It only does UHF and only has 16 channels, but once it's programmed, it's hard to screw it up. You can give it to a kid and say, turn it to turn it on. Channel 16, which is a scanning channel. It'll start scanning here in a minute, but I'm kind of getting off topic. Anyhow, cheap radios. The next thing up would be to acquire a GMRS license. They cost $35. They're good for 10 years. There's no test involved. It's basically you get an identifier with the Federal Communications Commission. It's kind of like a Social Security number, but they can't use the Social Security number, so they have what they call an FRN. Federal Reference. I forgot what it stands for, but you have to do the same thing for a ham license anymore. And I have a GMRS license. I forgot. I've never actually used it, but I actually got it. And anybody in my group can operate under my GMRS license. GMRS stands for General Mobile Radio Service. They're relatively short-range communication. I need to stick to the script here. The next thing down, is acquiring a technician class FCC license. They're fairly easy to get. It's a 35-word test, multiple choice. All the questions and all the answers from the question pool are online. There's lots of study guides, and 5-year-olds have passed the test before. So, you know, if somebody's got an IQ above room temperature, they really don't have, but they really can't say it's too hard for me, I can't get it in. Some people can just look at the questions and look at the correct answers and go sit for the test and write 100%. Some people have to study a little bit. For most folks, if they study for a day or two, they should be able to pass the technician class license. Some may take a little bit longer. The technician class license will be good for the local and somewhat regional communications. It's with a technician license. Oh, if I use acronyms or I'm talking about something that somebody doesn't understand, don't hesitate. You know, I don't make everybody wait till the end of the presentation to ask a question. If I'm in the audience and somebody says something I don't understand, if I don't say, hey, what did that mean? I won't remember it by the end of the presentation, so I understand. If you got a question, don't hesitate to throw up a hand or say, hey, shut up a minute. Anyhow, the amateur radio, known as ham licenses, come in 3 different, yeah.
What radios would be the best to get a hold of, and that would still work in case of an EMP hit?
Well, is this particular radio in a Faraday cage, or is it just sitting out in the open connected to an antenna?
Would that be okay?
No.
Okay. All right.
Well, we haven't had an EMP. I mean, nobody really knows. You know, back in the Cold War, they did the Bikini Atoll, they did testing, and they had lights go out in Hawaii 600 miles away, but we really haven't had, so far China hasn't floated a balloon over us with a nuclear device on it to detonate and make it lights out for us. The bottom line is, my radios, like this, this is a portable transceiver, also known as a handy-talkie. See this? My wife gets these at the dollar store. They come with these candy things in them. I usually eat a lot of the candies. But when it's done, you've got a Faraday cage here. It's a metal can that seals up reasonably well, and inside is a developing UV5R. Now you need to periodically take it out and recharge it, but you can store it in there for quite a while. Store it like that, set it up on the shelf. This will probably protect the radio if we did have an EMP, especially since the antenna is disconnected. The bottom line is that radios or anything else with delicate electronics, microelectronics, which everything is nowadays, an EMP is like a giant spark. You know, you walk across carpet in the dry weather, you touch somebody and there's a spark. Think of that as the EMP going in on your antenna input, and it basically would blow out the front end to where your radio doesn't. Yeah.
So what is your long-range radio there? What is the distance on your long-range radio? What would be?
Long range. I didn't. Long range. I just define that as 0 to 80 miles.
Okay. Are any of those that distance that you're holding up?
Yes and no. Like this as it stands, any of these handhelds with a little rubber, what do you call this, a rubber duck antenna?
Right.
You're not going to make 80 miles by itself from one radio to another one.
Right.
If you're working through a repeater, for instance, there's a Southwest Missouri linked repeater system. I think it's like 8 or 10 repeaters. They're all linked together. If you talk in on one of them, what goes in on one comes out on all of them.
That's right.
All over Southwest Missouri. So, yes.
Well, they even make the small repeaters too that you could use for your group if you.
Yeah. And we'll get into that a little bit later. They have, I'm mostly ham oriented, But you can do a fair amount if you've got, and I got another page down on GMRS repeaters. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
most, I'm not sure if there's, like, I have a GMRS license and I could install a GMRS repeater if I wanted to in Springfield. And they're done for businesses sometimes, but I don't know of any of them in Springfield. There may be, because you have one?
Yeah, I've got one.
Is it set up and operational?
It's new and I haven't used it, but I do have one.
Okay. But I mean, it's one thing to have it in a box on the shelf, it's another thing to have it mounted up on the top of a tower where you can talk from 10 miles to the repeater, and then somebody overhears 10 miles, receives it on the other end, you can go back and forth through the repeater. But for preparedness, it's a good idea, and I'll get to that in a slide. I tend to ramble too much, and in the interest of getting done before 10 o'clock tonight, I probably better move on. Where was I here? Anyhow, the technician class license will let you talk through repeaters, talk VHF and UHF, and limited stuff on 10 meters. But most of the stuff HF is, which is where you can talk from one radio to another one over a long distance, across the state, several states away or around the world. You really need a general class ham license for that. I started mentioning the 3 classes. There used to be 5 classes, but now there's 3. Technician class, general, and extra class. And really, there's no reason to go to extra class. Yeah.
Can you take, I was reading somewhere.
Speak up.
I was reading somewhere that you could take the technical and the general at the same time.
One right after the other. If you go sit for the test, you pay the $15 testing fee.
Yeah,
And if you don't have a license, you start off with technician class.
yeah.
You pass the technician class, they say, "Do you want to take the general class exam?" Sure, why not? It doesn't cost anything more, and if you haven't studied for it, you probably won't pass it. But if you studied for it, there's people that go, pay the $15, they take the technician, they pass it, they take the general, they pass it, and they take the extra and pass it, and come out with an extra class license for a total of $50. 15 for the voluntary examiners and $35 to the FCC. So if you think you want to move up in license, you're money ahead to take as many of them and pass as many as you can at once and get it over with. I recommend for most people, they're just going to be part of the group. Somebody's going to hand them a radio and say, "Go on patrol, leave the patrol, and talk back with us. We use the repeater if need be or whatnot." Technician class is all they really need. If they really get into it, I mean, it's a hobby, and some people really get into it and can spend thousands and thousands of dollars. But you don't have to do that. I generally recommend for people to get aspire to get a general class license. It's not that hard. I forgot if the question is 35 or 50 questions on that. It's still multiple choice, and all the questions in the question pool and all the answers are available online. Extra class is a little more detailed. I got that because I was interested in electronics growing up as a kid. Took 2 years of physics in high school, and I was an electronics technician in the Navy, so the technical part was easy for me. And studying the regulations were too hard. Anyhow, I climbed that mountain because it was there. I don't use the extra class privileges much at all. But I got to move on here. Did I see another hand? Anyhow, going through the license, and then the next thing is to acquire and install a 2 meter, 77 meter, sometimes it's heard as 2 meter 440, but it's VHF and UHF mobile mag mount antenna. One of these babies. You can take this, I don't see something metal here, just metal. Now, anyhow, something slapped on the roof of your car, run the cord in through the back door, preferably a door that's not used very much. Be careful when you run it in so you don't cut the coax here. You get one of these devices like this, a little adapter here. But this is what's called PL259 connector. If I was running this 2-meter radio in my car, it would screw right into the back of it. But let's say that I haven't got that yet, and I want to use my handy-dandy Bofeng UV5R. I screw the adapter in here. I've got that, and maybe I'm not using it in my car. Maybe I've got a refrigerator at home, or a filing cabinet or something. Something with roughly 2 foot by 2 foot square metal surface. Set that in the middle. That serves as a ground plane for the antenna. And anyhow, you unscrew your handy dandy little rubber duck antenna on your Bofeng, and you screw this in here. And with this antenna here, up as high as you can reasonably get it, or on top of the metal car roof, which acts as a good ground plane, you can probably triple or quadruple the range of the UV5R, or any other comparable 2-meter handheld. They say these are 5-watt radios. Some advertise them as 4 watts. I've seen some that would only output 3 watts. But realistically, the difference in range you're going to get between 3 watts and 5 watts is not really that much, or even 4 watts. And yeah, 10 watts will help you some, but it's moving along here. The next step up would be a dedicated FM mobile radio. Now this runs on 13.8 volts. So if you're using it in your car, you can run it off of your car battery. The one I've got recommended later on is a Yaesu FT2980, I think it is, which is, I believe, 80 watts. This is an older ICOM. They're both Japanese radios. This put out 65 watts when it was new. I think it's still doing about 60 watts. This is 2 meters only. And to run it at home, you need some kind of a power supply. You can bring in a car battery and a little trickle charge or something, but most people just run a power supply, just turn it on when you want to turn your radio on, and connect the radio to the power supply.
Inverter?
Pardon?
Inverter? Like a truck inverter?
Somewhat. Instead of the truck inverter takes 12 volts and makes 120 out of it, this thing takes 120 and makes 12 volts out of it. Just the opposite. And where are we there? So we've got the 2-meter mobile mag mount antenna. That's the next step up. And I've got some slide down on that kind of shows some prices and stuff. These are not very cheap on Amazon. You can get better ones that cost more. I think that one's like 21 bucks. So it's not that expensive, but it'll greatly enhance the range of even the cheapest radios of these. The handhelds. Acquire and install a 2-meter, 70 centimeter high gain outdoor base station antenna. The one I recommend, they're normally about 90 bucks. They're 17 foot long when they're put together. They come in 3 sections. You put them together, but it'll really increase your range for no matter what radio on the VHF and UHF you've got hooked up to it. And then acquire and install a 2-meter or 2-meter 70 centimeter dual band high power mobile radio. This would just be the single band. This is an ICOM IC V8000. They're no longer in production. There's the Yaesu I mentioned. Thinking it's like 180 bucks, but it puts out 80 watts. They're rock solid, bulletproof. I don't have one because that thing's been working so good. Yeah.
On the tower that you're talking about, 17-foot tower,
Speak up.
the 17-foot tower you're talking about?
No, that's a 17-foot long antenna that goes up on top of the tower or on top of a pipe mast, which we'll get to later.
That's right.
Basically, on VHF and UHF, the higher up you get your antenna, the farther you can talk. And ideally, you put up 120, 150 foot tower with real low loss coax and put a real high gain antenna up on the top of it, and your house is at the top of the hill, the top of the mountain. Then you can really talk a long way. But most people don't have that, so we work with what we have. We were down here and acquired and installed a 2-meter, 70-centimeter high-power mobile radio. Did this have a laser? Oops, that's not what I want. Oh, that's the laser. Okay. Acquired and installed 2-meter, the mobile radio, that would be something kind of like that. Acquire general coverage, single sideband receiver. Doesn't have to transmit, but that's for if the poop hits the fan and you want to monitor what's going on for situational awareness locally or elsewhere around the world. It can just be a little portable shortwave receiver. They have a thing nowadays called an SDR dongle. It looks like a flash drive, plugs into your computer. You download some free software and connect an antenna to it, and the things are just amazing. I think the cheapest ones are in the $20 range, and they can go up to a couple $100, but that's beyond the scope of this presentation. I advocate for people to get a little, for just general listening, a little portable shortwave receiver. My go-to used to be the Texan PL660. I think they may be out of production, and I read some stuff that the PL880 may be as good or better, but anyhow, I'm getting off track again. Let's see. Acquire an HF or an HF through UHF ham transceiver that transmits and receives. That's going to be in the $1,000 range, unless you get a used one, which you can find some good bargains on used ones at Hamfest and stuff. But the last thing here I've got highlighted in bold is get on the air and actually train with your equipment. Just buying some of these radios and setting the box up on the shelf and saying, well, if I ever need to use them, I will. It's kind of like, I don't know. Well, some folks buy a gun and never train, never practice with it either. But you really need to learn what works, what doesn't work. Learn if you want to talk to others, especially talk to ham, some of the protocols and stuff. You need to get on the air and actually talk and practice for a little bit. It's not something you got to do every day, but it's important. There's an awful lot of people that get the radios and then they just never do anything with it. And so it's kind of, what good is it? How many here are old enough to remember the old Burma shave signs along the highways? Okay, some of us. Used to be, for those of you not familiar with the Burma, used to be going down the highway and there'd be a sign with like good intentions, and then maybe a quarter or 500 yards further without. Each one of these was on a separate sign. And you watch, what's the next one going to say as you're going along? Anyhow, then the thing, what's in your comms wallet, there was a commercial, one of the banks or something, they had a commercial, what's in your wallet? So I kind of figured out it's supposed to be a little bit humorous. Short range comms, 0 to 1 miles, equipment for simplex. Simplex is one radio to another radio, or one radio, one handheld to this, or one of these to another one, not going through a repeater. Wish we could kill those lights up there in the back. The portable handheld transceivers will generally work for that. Even these, they're supposed to be 2 watts, and I saw one of the YouTubes where somebody measured it, and it was really closer to 1 watt, but it's 450, and it's a GMR, SFRS frequencies up in the end. There's some YouTubes that say that you can modify them and get VHF on it anyhow, but I haven't tried that yet. The Amazon Ferry delivered a couple of these to my door this week. I think it was $19.50 for 2 of them. And so far, let's see.
Power on. 8, 1, 16, 16, 6, 7, 8,
Let's see if we can
9,
rattle the cage of any of their repeaters. WF5U testing. That's the repeater ID and Morse code. I forgot what I had programmed on 13. It'd be those of you whose radios I programmed, it would be whatever's on channel 13 would be the same here. Okay. Anyhow, it's
Power on. 13.
I'll leave this on here in case somebody comes back. Anyhow, the UHF, that Baofeng BF888 is the first one up there. It's UHF only, 2 watts max output. You can program it to GMRS or FRS frequencies, or basically anything between, I think, 400 and 470 megahertz. I got 2 of them from Amazon this week for $19.95. I wasn't ready to buy 20 of them yet for $190, but at my math wasn't very good there, was it? At $9.50 each for $190 for 20 of them. Should be $9 each. The next step up would be a VHF, UHF, 4-watt max output, which you can program on the same thing as the one above, but you can also program on VHF frequencies, the 2-meter ham band, and the Baofeng UV5R, which has been the kind of the go-to for preppers and so forth for quite a while. Yeah, I think they were 19 bucks a piece on Amazon. Of course, Amazon charges tax on everything now, but darn it, used to be a lot of stuff you could find without paying tax, sales tax. But so it's probably 20 bucks with tax. There's the MERS, multiple use radio system, FRS, family radio system, and GMRS, general mobile radio system, dedicated radios. And you can use Citizens band. It's kind of old school, but it still works. The problem with Citizens band is that the antennas are pretty large, and you can spend a bunch of money on an antenna for CV to get any kind of a range out of it. Once again, all the stuff here is for short-range comms up to a mile or so. Depending on the conditions, you might get well over a mile. In some circumstances, if you're living down in a holler and there's a big hills all around, you might have trouble talking to somebody up on the other side of the hill. Licensing requirements for MERS, FRS, and CB, no license required. GMRS, it's a $35 license, but no test. And if a family wants to do GMRS, one person, dad can get the license and everybody in the family can operate under. I suppose somebody in Preppernet, Southwest Missouri could have a license and everybody in that group could operate under that one GMRS license. And for the top rate legally on the ham frequencies, it's a $15 testing fee plus 35 bucks to the FCC, which, let's go Brandon, you didn't have to pay the 35 bucks before Brandon. It may not be Brandon's fault because that may have been in the works before before the insurrection, but it has taken place since then. Let's see, intermediate range, 0 up to 20 miles. The portable handhelds might work if it's connected to a good high gain outside antenna. Once again, I referenced that UBS 300, which is the 17-foot tall. You can put it together. You can usually find them online somewhere for under 100 bucks. This is another option. If you don't want to put up a mast, this is an NITAX roll-up antenna, and if I can do the Velcro here, I can unfurl it. Come on. Oh, there we go. So I recollect these are about 20 bucks. You can hook a string through here, shoot your slingshot up over the tree with a fishing line or some twine, hoist this up into the tree, connect your coax down here, an extension to coax, and basically get this thing as high up in the tree. This is good for the 2 meters and 440 ham band. And so you can have it in a backpack or your bug out bag or whatever, where if you get someplace where this antenna on top of the roof of your vehicle isn't cutting it, and you really need to talk to somebody via a distant repeater or maybe simplex, something like this might work. It's not, if it's at the same height as the high gain 17-foot antenna I mentioned earlier, it's not going to work near as well, but it will work a lot better than the antenna that it comes with, or a lot better than that one. There's other options as well, but these are just some common ones that are easy to do. I have to put them back together here. No, I'll do that later. Where were we? I'm going to squat down here so I can read that. That high gain antenna that I mentioned, it comes under several names, and they come off the same assembly line in China or Taiwan. Workman or OPEC are two brands. They go by UVS 300. They have a shorter one, UVS 200. The same antenna is known as a Tram 1481, and there's a Jetstream JTB-1 or something like that that's the same antenna also. It's mainly 17-foot tall, 3 sections, and you need to feed it with good quality, low-loss coax and mount it as high up as you can get it. The cheapest way to get it reasonably high now for most folks is what I recommend is Wheeler Metals in Springfield. There's other Wheeler Metals around. They sell this used oil field drill stem pipe that's generally 32 feet long. And a few years ago, it was like 85 cents a foot. Now it's a 32-foot piece of it is going to run you around 80 bucks. So it's gone up in price a little bit. For most folks, the difficulty is moving a 30-foot piece of pipe. It is doable. I've hauled a 30-foot light pole behind a Toyota Corolla before from Fort Riley, Kansas back to here. It's with a 4 by 6 foot trailer. It takes a little ingenuity, but it's doable. But the bottom line is that pipe is thick enough and heavy enough to get a couple of people to help you. You can upright it and secure it to the high point in the house. The antenna's up top, coax comes down, and you can ground your coax or not, do something like a polyphase or lightning arrestor.
Does it need to be above tree level?
No, it doesn't have to be.
As long as it's basically above the mountain, about, if you're in hollers or on the ridge, if you're above.
If you're down in a real low holler, like it's Ken here, if you're like Ken's house, you're screwed, radio-wise. There's some things you can do, and that's where that.
I'm above that. I'm at 1,270 feet.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, especially at UHF and VHF, higher is everything. It's not the elevation of your house, it's how high you get up your antenna above the average surrounding ground around there. I had a 140-foot tower at my house until the storm took it down a few years ago. And with the beam antenna, I could work repeaters in St. Louis whenever I wanted to. And there's a big rise between here and St. Louis. I could work repeaters up in St. Joe from my house just outside of Springfield. So basically, anyhow, getting off track with that. For the reliable two-way simplex comms, much beyond 4 to 5 miles, you really need to get a ham license. And that way you can legally transmit with a lot better equipment and a lot higher power, up to 1,500 watts. I think, anyhow, practically speaking, the 80-watt 2-meter mobile transceiver, the FT2980, I think that's the best bang for the buck for really wanting to, if you want to be able to reliably talk to somebody out to 20 miles or so, that's what I'd recommend doing. It's 2 meters only, needs a ham license, but it's pretty reasonably priced, and you could be pretty assured, unless you're down in that holler at the bottom of it, that you could reach out and touch somebody comms-wise for not too much money. Where was I here? Even if you're down in the holler, for most folks, there's probably gonna be, somebody just tickled the repeater. For most folks, there's probably gonna be some ham repeater that's within range with a reasonable antenna, even if all you've got's a handheld, but with an outside antenna. That the problem with that, depending on repeaters for your comms, is that if the grid goes down, the repeaters are gonna go down too. 99% of them. There may be a few that somebody's got on solar power and they protected all the equipment and the EMP didn't get it, or maybe they had backup that they could come out and install it after the third EMP. But for most of them, you can count on the repeaters are gonna probably go down if we do have an EMP. And how likely is an EMP? I don't know. With the saber rattling that we're doing with China nowadays, I think it's pretty much a given that if China decides that we've pissed them off enough, that they're gonna do an EMP and take our grid down and hack the other stuff and do a cyber attack and EMP, and we'd be totally hosed.
Without the repeater, would you still be within 15 to 35 mile range there with that ASU?
With the ASU and a good outside antenna, yeah.
So
Yeah,
you still have that range without a repeater?
Yeah, you should be able to. I mean, it's depending on your location. If you're, hills and you're kind of close to the top of this hill, okay, especially if you can get a tall enough, like with that 32-foot drill stem pipe. I've got 3 of them, and I think, if you're familiar with oil field, they're drilling it all, they screw together. They've got a swollen thing where they screw together. I believe I've picked up one end of the 32. It's heavy and it flexes some, but not that much. I think you could probably cut the second one in half so that you'd have roughly 45 to 50 feet and anchor it at the base and have it 50 feet tall without a bunch of guy wires on it. And then you got a 17-foot antenna up top of that. So you could get it. There's ways of doing it. In the olden days, you could get tower sections. You go around the rural areas, and there's a tower that somebody used to have a TV antenna on. You knock on the door. Hey, you want to get rid of that tower? Well, yeah. I'll take it down for you if I can have it. Sure. Those deals are harder to find anymore. Usually, the Road 25 tower sections comes in 10 feet. You can buy new ones for, I think they're several $100s a piece for a 10-foot section. So if you're going to put up a 100-foot tower, it can get expensive pretty quick. But you can find deals at Hamfest and on Craigslist. Anyhow, I'm getting off track again. We're probably ready for the next one. Duplex through repeaters. Relatively local comms, such as the neighborhood watch on steroids. That's a GMRS repeater could be set up. It covers several miles. It would be more than adequate for these $9 radios. They can operate through it, but it would take setting up a repeater and maintaining it and keeping it going is a lot more complicated than just buying a couple of these and getting them programmed. Somebody would need to do that. Probably a ham or probably the neighborhood watch leader or something like that, or the radio operator, but that's definitely a possibility. The lady that has a GMRS repeater, I think she's facing the other way. I'm curious what kind it is and ballpark what it costs. We'll catch her later.
She's busy talking.
You have the GMRS repeater?
Yes.
Do you mind if I ask what brand and model it is and how much it costs?
I actually got it about 2 weeks ago, so I cannot tell you that answer, and it's still in the box. You're right, I haven't used it yet. My brother works on all that kind of stuff, so that's why I got one. He kind of pushed it in my direction.
Do you know about power output? I think they're limited to 50 watts. Do you know, is it a 50-watt
I
radio?
think it is 50.
Okay. And I might be interested in doing that sometime, just for the heck of it. But anyhow, with the GMRS, to operate, you know, if the poop hits the fan, there's no rule of law anymore. Who cares if you have a license? The main reason for getting a ham license, or I guess a GMRS license, although with GMRS I did get a license, but I wouldn't feel bashful at all about operating GMRS without a license, because I suspect most of the people out there don't pay too much attention to that. It's kind of like the CBs were back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, when you're supposed to have a CB license, but nobody did. But anyhow, for the folks in the shit hit, poop hits the fan comm scenario, where some members of the group are unwilling to get a ham license, and there's plenty of folks, probably some in this room, that I'm not going to get a ham license because I don't want to be on the FCC list. Well, you're probably already on lots of lists already. Yeah.
How long are those licenses?
10 years. Yeah. So if you look at the $50 that costs to get a license, amortized over 10 years, $5 a year for the license. 10 years. I'm 99.9% sure that it's 10 years also. And so $3.50 a year. But if you have 15 people operating under that license, then that makes it a lot cheaper. But the bottom line is that with the GMRS repeater, unless you've got a really great location, it still isn't, given that it's at UHF frequencies, which generally don't travel quite as far, it's probably not going to have the coverage area that a good ham repeater would. But it's still definitely a viable option for somebody that wants to get all that stuff up, prepared to set aside, put it in their galvanized trash can for the Faraday cage. I'd highly recommend getting it set up and operated, make sure everything's working, get the bugs worked out before storing it away for after the EMP. Let's see, a good 2-meter mobile with a high gain outside antenna should work. 3 repeaters, a lot of the repeaters are 60 miles or more away, and especially some of the link repeater systems. They can go cover some of them out west. They've got link repeater systems that cover multiple states. License requirements: the GMRS is $35 for one person is supposed to have it, but the whole group can use it. I've listened to a bunch of in my scanner, I've got a lot of GMR frequencies in it, and I never hear anybody ID with this, I think mine is WRG 502 or something like that. I never hear anybody give their call sign of a license on the GMRS frequency, so I'm kind of assuming that nobody does. Moving along. Long range. Everything here on down pretty much infers a ham license. GMRS just won't cut it at these ranges. The 2-meter FM high power base station, back to this again, 60 watts or better, using the high gain directional antenna. That'd be a beam antenna, and normally when I said I could work the repeaters in St. Louis, that was with a 26 element beam. There was 2 13-element beams side by side, Cushcraft antenna, up at 140 feet, fed with half-inch heliacs, really good low-loss coax, and sometimes I used a 160-watt amplifier. I have a long, getting off track here. If you're talking to, let's say you've got Joe here wants to be able to communicate with Sam after the poop hits the fan, and they're 80 miles apart. They both get the 60 or 80 watt mobile radio and a power supply, get as tall an antenna as they can, let's assume neither one's down in the valley, and they've got beams pointed at each other. They should be able to communicate pretty easily, even at 80 miles, if they're on relatively high location. Normally, if you have a beam antenna, you have what's called a rotator. Some folks call it a rotor. But basically, you've got the little box by your desk here, and you turn the knob to north-northeast, and the rotator swings the antenna around to north-northeast, and you're wanting to talk to somebody there, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this. 2-meter SSB, that's single sideband. it can provide more range than FM, but the radios are a lot more expensive, and whoever's at the other end, unless they're into ham radio for a hobby, they're probably not gonna have a 2-meter SSB. For most folks, it's not recommended, but it's a possibility in certain circumstances.
Question.
Yeah,
So you've got two communicating. and
Speak up.
If we've got two communicating between each other, a satellite can knock that out, right? If they were to hit us with a satellite course.
well, when you say knock it out, is the satellite like a laser
Yeah,
to
like
take you out, or a guided missile or something?
Well, it could be a laser, or it could be somebody that was gonna do an EMP and they would knock it out with a satellite first. They could knock out your radio. So isn't it good to have a Faraday on the side anyway?
Oh, well, it's not, to me, when I reference the Faraday cage, I'm not worried about satellites doing something,
I was just
unless
saying
it's
it could knock out a.
unless it's a Chinese satellite that has a nuclear device on board, where we're gonna drop out of orbit and come down to about 200 miles up and detonate, and take out the electric grid for the central United States, and at the same time we're doing that, there was a cargo ship off of the east, coming into port off of the East Coast that had a certain 40-foot shipping container stacked on the top, and there's one coming in from the West Coast of California, and the lid opens up on this, and up comes a Scud missile with a nuclear device on it. They go up 200 miles, detonate. It's lights out for us for probably 30, 40 years or more.
That's why they were testing those balloons.
Exactly.
Now, we don't all have tinfoil hats here, so, I don't know. It sure seems suspicious, that balloon thing. But generally, most folks consider the balloons weren't quite high enough. The higher they are for the nuclear detonation, the bigger a range it gets for the EMP. And most of the stuff I've read said that the balloons really aren't high enough for that, but, maybe part of the payload was a missile that they drop it like they used to drop the X-15 underneath the wing of a bigger aircraft, and it drops off and then goes up. Perhaps something like that. I think probably the Chinese, if I were the Chinese, I would already have satellites up there with the nuclear devices already on the satellite, so when the time comes, you hit the go button and they decelerate and drop out of orbit at the right place and detonate at the right time. And we're back in we're worse than the Stone Age, because the Stone Age folks knew how to live in the Stone Age. We don't. The 6-meter FM and SSB, a little bit longer range than 2-meter, but it's kind of like 2-meter SSB. It's kind of a specialized thing, not recommended for most folks in most situations, but it's something to think about, and I probably could have left it off of here. For the HF single sideband, you can operate with modest power on 40 meters or 80 meters. And with the NVIS antenna, that's near vertical incident skywave antenna. The antenna is a dipole antenna, fairly low to the ground, like maybe 8 or 10 feet off the ground, which is real easy to put up. And when it's that low to the ground, it tends to radiate the signal pretty much close to straight up. Bounces off the ionosphere and comes down not too far away, maybe 30, 40, 50, 200 miles out. If the antenna is higher up at an optimal range, if you're wanting to talk to somebody in Europe, it sends the signal more like that, bounces off the ionosphere, and comes down a lot further away. I have a inverted B antenna at home with the top of it's about 60 feet. It comes down to, and it's about 60 feet long on the side, real simple to build. Comes down to about 15 or 20 feet above the ground on the ends. And there's a net on 3860 that's on Monday through Saturday, I think, called the Eastern Regional Patriots Net that I check into sometimes. And I can usually reliably talk to other stations, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and so forth. A lot depends on band conditions. Sometimes the band's real noisy, sometimes it's not. But basically, it's a 100-watt HF radio on sideband, working on 80 meters in the evening. 40 meters would probably be a daytime. With a relatively cheap antenna, you can buy them pre-made, but you can also build them pretty easily as well. And you can talk to, I'm probably on to the next slide with that, but he can easily talk, one of the guys that's one of the net control stations is about 20 miles away from me, and usually I can hear him pretty well. Sometimes with HF, it'll kind of skip over it, where stations closer you might not hear, but you hear them further out. There's digital modes, which I'm really not going to go into tonight. A lot of times they're keyboard to keyboard. A lot of times you can communicate really long distances with very low power with some of the digital modes. And I already mentioned the transceiver and antenna requirements are fairly modest. A lot of times you can find good bargains. A lot of hams, I think the average age of ham radio operators is 68 or 70 or something like that. And we're old. I'll be 72 this year. And most hams are, the average, hams are old and they die. And when they die, a lot of times their kids don't want to have anything to do with the ham radio equipment, so it gets sold at an estate auction. And a lot of times you can get nice stuff for a song. And there's a lot of it available because there's a lot of old hams and we're dying off. It happens. Regional out to 400 miles. This is pretty much the FM isn't going to cut it here. You're going to need to be on HF. The 100-watt HF transceiver is going to work pretty good with a do-it-yourself antenna, where you can buy them. Like I said before, excellent bargains can be found. If you're wanting to go global, you've got somebody you might want to talk to in another country. You're probably going to want a beam antenna. The 100-watt HF transceiver, depending on band conditions. I've talked to Japan before with 10 watts on 10 meters. Actually, it was 5 watts. And it came in like it was right next door. But if you want to be able to reliably communicate, you're probably going to want at least 100 watts. You might want an amplifier. You can legally transmit with up to 1,500 watts with a ham license. You can get a 600-watt amplifier or 1,000, even a 1,200 watt for not too much money. But you're probably going to want an HF beam antenna. And the situation, higher is better up to a point. But a lot of hams that work DX around the world in other countries, they may have an antenna that's only up 30 or 40 feet. But they'll have a rotator to where they can rotate it around and point it to wherever they want to talk to. If you want to have long distance comms with only one station, and you have some acreage, like more than an acre, there's wire antennas that you can build pretty easily. They're fairly low to the ground. One of them's called a beverage antenna, but it may have wires going out 600 feet, kind of a V thing, where the signal will be beamed in the direction, kind of in the apex of it. There's a bunch of different stuff, and there's antenna books and stuff, but the bottom line is it's doable if somebody wanted to set up dedicated comms for just one direction. My former boss, when I worked at City Utilities, used to have a schedule every night with his father-in-law who lived in upstate New York, and he talked to him on ham radio every night. Dan mentioned, what time are we? How are we doing time-wise?
You got about 40 more minutes.
Okay. Equipment recommendations. The Bofang UV5R, $19 as of yesterday. I didn't check today on Amazon. And single quantities. I didn't find any great deals on buying a whole bunch of them. The Bofang BF888S. I got 2 of these for, I think it was $19.50 on Amazon, and the 20-pack was $189. How did my math get so screwed up? It would be $9 instead of $9.50. The ASU VX6R, that's still in production. It's similar to this Kenwood. This is an older Kenwood THF6A. It does 2 meters, 440. I think it does 220. it will do, and it listens, it hears, has a receiver from basically DC to daylight, I think 150 kilohertz up to 999 megahertz. And one reason I got this, it will receive single sideband on that. So in theory, I can hook up one of my wire antennas to it with a little adapter here and listen to HF sideband. I thought that was a really neat feature, but to be honest, I've never used it much. But this was about a $250 radio 15, 20 years ago. They discontinued them, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. They can still be found, but that Yaesu VX6R would have similar capabilities. I think you can drop it in the pool and it's okay. Roughly $250 at Arndell Electronics, Ham Radio Outlet, DX Engineering, and Gigaparts. Pretty much the same prices. I'm not saying there's any price fixing among all that, but there is. The digital, if you want to go DMR digital, and the Baofeng DM1701, which I don't have one here. I don't have one of those. That's a little bit new to me. It supposedly does basic encryption. The main reason from the prepper standpoint on the DMR is if you don't want to be listened in on. You want to communicate with who you want to communicate with, and you don't want other folks to be able to hear what you're saying. You really need to do encryption if you're doing that. Military does it, a lot. Public service agencies are going encrypted now, so much to the dismay of a lot of scanner owners. And it's totally illegal on ham frequencies. I'm not saying it's never done, but it's illegal on ham frequency. But if you're doing in the digital modes, the casual listener listening in, they hear a bunch of noise on there, and it's digital noise, and how would they know if it's encrypted or not? It's digital noise. Anyhow, the Baofeng DM1701, if somebody wants to get into encrypted comms, it's a basic encryption. It's not to the AES 256 standard, but they're fairly cheap, roughly $90 for those radios. They have an 1801, which I couldn't find out much information on, and I think they were down in the $60 range. I saw some websites that said it would do encryption, but some not. The problem with the 1701 and the other cheap ones, they'll only talk to each other. The Anytone ATD878 UV Plus, too long of a name in my opinion. One of these feels like a brick, it's mainly the battery, but it's UHF, VHF, it does DMR, one of the digital modes. And the reason I got that is because it has encryption capability, the full 256-bit AES, which it's supposed to be able to talk to encrypted Motorola radios. You got to have the same encryption key in both of them, of course, but they're over $300. So it's something good if you're really serious about it. Those up there were for short-range radios, intermediate range radios. I mentioned the Yaesu FT2980 before. $190 to get it basically everywhere, no price fixing or anything. And that's just a 2 meter only. If you want the 2 meter, 70 centimeter mobile, probably the best deal that I would recommend that I've not actually had a Yaesu FTM 6000, but they had good reviews. The 2980R is 80 watts on 2 meters. That one there. This one, I believe, if I remember right, it's 50 watts on 2 meters and 440. A lot of times the 440 or 70 centimeter will be a little bit less power. But I'm thinking that was 50 on both of them. And this Anytone 778 UV is a significantly cheaper dual band. I don't know anything about it. And I do know, I believe, if I remember right, it was only 25 watts on both 2 meters and 70 centimeters. And the BTEC, which may come off the same assembly line, which is a different name on it, it's fairly cheap. I don't know anything about it, but these Chinese radios, a lot of folks say you get what you pay for. The UV5Rs are for $19. They're tremendous bang for the buck compared to $250 for a handheld radio. But the $250 Yaesu, it's definitely going to be a lot better radio than the $19 Baofeng. That said, will it talk 3 times as far? No, probably not. Will it last 3 times as long? Probably. The mobile antenna. Mentioned the roof mount here earlier. A lot of times the cable will be anywhere from, usually the standard cable length is close to 17 feet, I think. Long enough to get it in, mount it on the roof of your truck, car, or whatnot, bring it into a back, preferably a back door, than one that's open the least, because the more you open and close and slam the door on that, the quicker the cable's going to get a kink in it and wear out. That's, I think, the one right there. The one on Amazon for $21.99 is either that one or one very close to it. They've got a lip mount thing that basically screws on a trunk lip. It's not mag mount. You normally bring the coax in through the trunk and route it up front to where your radio is. For a little more permanent install, the nice thing about the mag mount is you're going to go on a trip and you want to have comms. You slap the antenna on the roof, route the coax in, hook the radio up to it, and you're good to go. The trunk lip mount, and you can take it off real easily when you want to. The trunk lip mount is a little more permanent. It's generally a permanent installation. A little more permanent than that is to drill a hole in your roof with a special drill and put what's called an NMO mount as close to the center of your roof as you can. And you can get that mount from Amazon, and then you put an antenna, a good antenna on top of it. My go-to antenna, they're kind of pricey. It's a Larson 2 meter 70 centimeter antenna. It's about this tall, and the Great Tacoma out there has one on the roof. Anyhow, that's been the best antenna I've found so far. For the portable antenna, the N9TAX, this one, that price up there, $25. There's a lot of competition between N9TAX and Edphone. Some people claim the Edphone's better, some people say it's kind of like Fords and Chevys. This one, that one, $50 versus $25. I'll go with the $25. And most of the stuff I've seen says that they work just as good or maybe a little bit better. The Edphone antenna, I think, is made to put in a piece of PVC pipe. So if you wanted to mount it up on a pole, for a semi-permanent installation or permanent, I don't recommend either one of these unless you live down in a holler, and the cost to put up a tower tall enough to get up reach up above the top of the holler is prohibitively expensive, but you got a lot of really tall trees, and you got a good slingshot and a lead sinker that you can shoot up over the top where you can pull a string up and pull that thing up close to the top of one of those trees, and have it up there, and have your coax come down and go into your shack to operate from connected to your handheld or to your mobile radio that you're operating as a base, or if you want to spring for the bigger bucks and get an actual base station radio.
How far can you really get a coax between that thing you threw over the tree and the base station or the handheld? How far can you run a coax and still get signal?
As long as you want.
Really?
But there's loss in the coax. And so the longer you're going to run the coax, especially in VHF and UHF, the better your coax needs to be. And we'll get to that in a minute here. My go-to coax for most folks for VHF, UHF is LMR 400. It's not real cheap, but you get what you pay for in that. For something like this thing here, you're going to hoist it up 30 feet, and you're going to hoist it up in a tree 30 feet. When you stop to talk, and bring it down to the window of your truck and hook it to your handy-talkie and talk on there when your mag mount on top wasn't doing anything. You could probably get by with RG58. I'd go with LMR 240 on that. But the base station antenna I already mentioned earlier, the multiple different brands. Wrong back. R&L, shoot me an email, and I screwed up on my PowerPoint presentation, and I saved it in a format that just saved these as pictures, which means you can't, with the picture, you can't click on the hyperlink and go to that website. But anyhow, I'm probably going to fix that if there's enough interest in it. If folks shoot me an email and say, hey, I'd like to have that whole presentation, but with clickable hyperlinks, okay, I'll do it. Anyhow, these are different vendors that sell these. This was the Jetstream with the tram. The Workman, OPEC, I've had Workman for years. I think I've had one OPEC. When I had them up on top of my 140-foot tower, the winds are strong enough in storms up there that these antennas would last 5 or maybe 6 years. Down a lot closer to the ground where the wind's not near as strong, they'll probably last longer. The current one I've got up is on a 70-foot tower, and I think it's been up there for 7 or 8 years, and it's still working fine. It's a Workman UBS 300. Out at my place in Webster County, I've got a Tram 1481. They look identical, except you can get them in black, which some people think that the black looks a lot cooler than the white, but the one at home is white privilege. And the Jetstream, they're all, and the Comet GP9, it's Comet's top of the line. They're generally a little more expensive. They claim to be heavier duty. I've had some people tell me they're all the same, but anyhow, I don't know. I think the Comet is around $250. The base station antenna mast, I mentioned the drill stem earlier, roughly $80 at Wheeler Metals. My former go-to option was a 21-foot stick of chain link fence top rail. That you can put that 17-foot antenna, mount it to the top of it, and one person can manhandle it up against the side of the house, stick the bottom in the ground a little bit, get one of these house bracket things up at the peak of your house where it comes up. It's sticking well up above the roof. It's easy enough for one person can do with a 21-foot stick and chain link fence top rail by themselves. Used to be you could get those for $12 or so, but let's go Brandon. The coax cable, LMR 400, that's my go-to for anything VHF or UHF. Depending on what you're wanting to get, the quality of it, you can get it for direct burial. There's other places besides Show Me Cables. That's just something I came across. I've gotten stuff from them before. I think it's pretty good. A lot of Ham Fest, they'll have a vendor there that's selling coax and stuff. And a lot of times you can get it with connectors already on the ends, or you can just buy the raw cable and put the connectors on yourself. Or Southwest Missouri Amateur Radio Club, every quarter they have what they call a tech day. And somebody can bring their cable over here, and I got some connectors here, and I need to get these connectors put on. Sure, we'll put them on for you. Or, if you're a member of the club, I think they still do it. They have like a 1,000-foot roll of coax there that you could buy it at the club discount price. How much do you need? 140 feet? Okay, it's X amount of foot. Cut off that much, put connectors on it. And I think you got to be a club member to get that, but Southwest Missouri Amateur Radio Club is $20 or $25 a year for membership. Anyhow, power supplies. The Samlex, you know, why would I spend $114? Most places there's 150 or 160 for this, as opposed to, I think that was a 25 or 30, this is a 23 amp supply, 23 amps at 13.8 volts, versus Amazon had one of these that looks like a computer power supply for $24. Why would you spend that? Because this one's pretty well guaranteed to not put out any RF noise. If you've ever had a radio around computers, or if you go by a drive-through restaurant or something, a lot of times they got all kinds of computers. There's lots of RF noise. If you get something like this, it might work wonderful, and it might not be noisy, but it also might be noisy. So from Amazon, I might buy it and hook it up. Now, this makes all kinds of noise. Return. Okay, this I'm not going to belabor all this. It's a bunch of stuff. I've watched most or parts of all of these. There's a lot of YouTubes that didn't make the list. It used to be, I would just put the YouTube link up there, but not tell what it was, so you can kind of look at what it was and see if it looks like something you might be interested in. Ham license testing. If you live in Springfield or the close to this area, the next amateur radio club does testing the second Saturday of every month, or right before their meeting. In Southwest Missouri, that's NARC. SMARC, Southwest Missouri Amateur Radio Club, does it on the third Saturday. And these are, sometimes there'll be a holiday or something that falls on the Saturday, so they'll change it. But anyhow, there's the links to those. It used to be you could just do a walk-in. And it used to be 14. Here's my 14 bucks. I want to sit for the exam. Okay, no problem. Fill out this paperwork. Nowadays, you got to go on the FCC website and get I think it's an FRN number, and bring that and print it out and bring that FRN number with you to the testing. Is there anybody that's tested recently that can confirm that? I should know. I'm a volunteer examiner with ARRL, but I haven't done that in a while. Anyhow, this top one up here, if you don't live around here, you can log onto that website, put in where you are, and I think where's the closest ham exams within 50 miles or something like that, and it'll give you a link to different. Usually ham radio clubs do the testing. During COVID, it was possible to get tested, do online testing. I don't know anybody that's done it. I got the impression it was a royal pain in the butt, but it might be an option for somebody that, it might be an option, and I don't know for a fact that they're still doing it. For just additional assistance, this kind of describes a little bit the SMART, Southwest Missouri Amateur Radio Club, that's on their website. How do I start? It's got some info on there. They've got upcoming events, and I forgot where I got that or why I have it on there, but might be something to look at too. Additional resources. How many folks were recipients of all this stuff that I sent out? Not everybody, okay. Well, if you want to get this, Kobe has it. Email Kobe and say, Kobe, send me all that crap that Alan had for you. Or, Kobe, give me
I
Alan's.
do plan on putting a link,
Okay.
a PDF link to this with clickable links on Preppernet.net inside our Southwest Missouri group. So I'll post this with clickable links.
Okay. And I have a prepper's email list that I send stuff out. I don't spam, but I try not to send too much stuff out. Occasionally somebody says, quit sending me this crap, I'm not interested. But not too often, once in a while it happens. But if you want that, A W Busick, Alpha Whiskey Bravo Uniform Sierra India Echo Kilo @gmail.com is my email address. Just shoot me an email and say, add me to your preppers distribution list, and you'll get this kind of stuff.
Is it in the notes? 'Cause I don't remember.
Your email?
I don't think it is. Kobe will give it to you. If you can't remember me, ask Kobe. I periodically send out a list of known preparedness prepper meetings and resources, which it is on the top of that. Anyhow, this is some old slides from at Gmail. Yeah. This is some stuff that I thought about calling them off of here, but still. FRS Family Radio Service, that's the kind of radios that you see they sell in Walmart, Bass Pro, places like that. There are 22 channels. They're shared with GMRS. They've got a 2-watt or a 0.5 watt maximum power depending on which channels. Handheld only. You can't remove the antenna, connect an external antenna. Range typically less than a mile. As cheap as the BF 8088s are, I would never buy one of those. But, if somebody finds them on the clearance aisle for $2 for a blister pack of 2 of them, something to give to the kids to play with, maybe then. The BF 888s, with the programming with them, you can talk to those, and vice versa. The GMRS, General Mobile Radio Service, it does require a license, but back in the day, Citizens Band required a license too, but who bothered? There are 30 channels, some shared with FRS, 50 watts max power output, only on the GMRS only frequencies. 5 watts max power on the shared ones. You can have handheld radios or the base station, which kind of look like that. External antennas are okay. Range probably up to 25 miles from a good base station to a good base station. More of them if you're operating, maybe if you're operating through a repeater, depending on how good the repeater is, how high it is, and so forth and so on. Multi-use radio systems. I don't know that I don't remember actually seeing a handheld like that. I have one of these. This is a Dakota Alert. It's a passive infrared. You can set it up by your driveway. Basically, they're in the 151 to 154. They're good for several miles. Basically, it's an intrusion detector. And they have 2 watts max power output. You're not supposed to put much of an antenna on them, but you can see right there, that's removable, and you connect that UBS 300 antenna that I talked about. It can be connected to that and talk much further. Range up to 10 miles, probably with an outside antenna. If you had a rural property, let's say you had a bug out location 25 miles away, and you wanted to know when critters, 2-legged or 4-legged, were creeping about your property, you might have some of these set up, and you might have a beam antenna that pointed back towards your house, and a beam antenna at your house pointed so you could maximize your signal. And with something like that, you could probably pick up your intrusion detection from a longer distance than 10 miles. I don't know anybody's done that, but no reason it couldn't be done. Citizens band. Anybody doesn't know about Citizens Band, it's kind of old school, legally 4 watts max output, 12 watts with sideband. With those, you could get a radio like that for sometimes $39. I think they've gone up a little bit. Let's go, Brandon. Anyhow, I think I've got at least one similar to that. But I've also got an HF general coverage, a ACU FT857, which is full coverage on HF, which you can modify it to where it can transmit outside the ham bands. And yes, it will transmit on Citizens Band frequencies with 100 watts. Well, I would never do that. VHF Marine Band, you can trot over to Bass Pro or any place like Bass Pro and buy you one of these radios. There's no license required for them, but it's only legal to use it on a boat while you're on the water. You can't use it on your boat while it's sitting in your driveway on the trailer. But that being said, if you're in the southwest Missouri Ozarks, far away from any place where the Coast Guard might be, like you're not close to Table Rock or Bull Shows or something like that. When I say not close, maybe you're at least 50 miles away. And you found a really good bargain on some of these, that might be a viable option, especially in a poop hits the fan scenario. I'm not advocating that, of course. I'm just saying it's probably been done and it probably could be done. And of course, your trusty handy-dandy Bofang can be programmed to those frequencies to talk to them. So let's say you might get that as a base unit and you can talk to these. I'm thinking I've seen those in the $100 to $140 range. I haven't looked for them in several years. But a lot of your ham radios can be, it's clip one wire or undo one solder blob, and what was limited to the ham bands only, now all of a sudden you can transmit way outside the ham bands. Of course, I wouldn't advocate that. Doing that might not be legal. But in a scenario where the poop hits the fan and there's no rule of law, it's nice to have options. Amateur radio. This radio right here might look a lot like this. And that one there might look a lot like one I have at home. And I don't have that amplifier. So far I haven't really needed one. I used to have an amplifier that would put out 2,500 watts continuous, 24 hours a day if you wanted to. But I didn't really have anything to hook it up to, so I sold it. I got it cheap, but it stood this, it weighed 667 pounds and stood this tall. Monitoring, just listening to stuff. That there used to be my go-to. My PL 660 is in the bathroom, and I think it's got a capacitor that's gone bad in it because it has a motorboating noise now, but I've had it for 5 or 6 years. I don't happen to have this unit and scanner. Anyhow, this is just for listening. But a shortwave portable radio like that, you can listen to that. You'd want to get one that does a single sideband. So you can listen to, if a poop hits the fan scenario, regular news sources are going to be very controlled. But if you want to know what's going on in a distant city, there's probably going to be some hams talking about it. Now, who knows what's really going to happen? I mean, if it gets to be like East Germany during the Cold War, people didn't say anything because you get turned in. And so I don't really, a lot of people say that you need a shortwave radio to maintain situational awareness in case the poop hits the fan. I don't know. I'm a ham. Am I going to be talking about a bunch of stuff going on here? I'm probably going to be doing a lot more listening. So how much talking I'm going to be doing, I don't know. It depends on the circumstance. Anytime I'm talking, I am inviting alphabet soup agencies who might not want me to be talking to come and knock on my door, maybe with one of those things that breaks the door in. And I don't want that to happen. But it's good to have the capability to listen. This regular police scanner, in the olden days, they used to be pretty simple. You turned it on, they were FM, but nowadays there's all kinds of digital stuff. Unit has some stuff they call home. Have some that are supposed to be plug and play. I've got a friend that's got one. He says it works great. I think this one has a few more bells and whistles. But listening to public service, and during an ice storm, power's out. You might have programmed in the frequencies for the local utility company, the electric company, find out where the crews are when your power might come back on. Or if you live in an area where there might be several disturbances, it might be nice to know, although more and more police departments are going encrypted, which you're kind of SOL when they do that. Okay, this is just an old slide from the other one that talks a little bit about repeaters. I'm probably running short on time. I'm going to skip through this. This is some older recommendations. It'll still be on the thing. I mentioned the SDR dongle. There's a price for it. Everybody, get your ham license. There's a bunch of study guides. It's easy to get and get. I advocate several of the dual band, the Boping UV5 bars, several of them, so that if one breaks, you got spares. You can get the hubby and wife both get their ham license, get a mag mount antenna put on the cars. You can talk to each other if you don't want to use cell phones all over town, especially through repeaters and stuff, or from the base station to the mobile. You're going to be home for dinner? No, I'm going to the bar. That's the UVS 300. From roughly here up to there, 17 feet. Comes in 3 sections. It's got some radials mounted at the bottom here that stick out about 19 inches or so. And my recommendations used to be the 21-foot stick of chain link fence top rail. For those who can do it, that 32-foot of drill stem pipe from Wheeler Metals will get you up considerably higher. And at these frequencies, height really counts for a lot. You want the low loss coax, LMR 400 for this preferably. RG8 will work if the length of it's not too far, probably 75 feet or less. RG8 probably, or 50 feet or less. More than 50 feet, I definitely want to go with LMR 400.
You have to run a ground post right beside it or something?
What did I do there?
the end of your presentation maybe?
Oh,
Is that the last slide?
maybe.
Did you put that repeater
I
page?
think the computer may have decided my time was up. I don't know if I mentioned this, a bigger version of that, and with this, you can put in, not only your handheld radio, we'll go in there and take the antenna off, but your little base charger. I don't know how much electronics these have in here, but if you had your radio stored in your handy dandy Faraday cage, and you left these sitting out, and the EMP fried these, and you couldn't charge it anymore, that might not be good. But one of these little bigger ones, these are probably not $1. I bet these were at least $2. And that goes in there, antenna in there. But now this one, some of these, it was appeared to be bare metal. This is painted. To be honest, this fits pretty snug. With the paint underneath there, which paint's normally an insulator, I would prefer this to be metal to metal without paint in there. So it might be better to get to sand that off so you got your metal here to metal there, or get some metallized duct tape and go around that perhaps. But anyhow, a cheap Faraday cage for radios. I was forgetting. Oh yeah, this book here, The Gorilla's Guide to Developing Radios by NC Scout. It's everything, both things. He advocates, he's mostly for tactical team type stuff. He says everybody needs to know how to program it from the front keypad and only put one frequency in there. When you go out on patrol, that way, if your radio gets lost, the enemy can't get it and see all your frequencies. This is more from a tactical militia type standpoint. Another good book that I just got recently, they had these at Sam's Club, is James Wesley Rawls' book, which why I hadn't gotten it before, I don't know, but it's kind of a 3-ring binder type thing, The Ultimate Prepper Survival Guide. It's got a lot of really good stuff in it. Who hasn't read James Wesley Rawls' book, Patriots? Everybody's read it? Good book. He's kind of, I guess some people would consider him the godfather of prepping. But anyhow, we'll call me done. Stick a fork in me.
Okay, questions real quick.
Yeah.
You mentioned auctions for equipment, and there's one tomorrow outside of Galena, besides your usual cars, trucks, vehicles, motorcycles, boats, there's gonna be ham radios, towers, electronic equipment.
There might be some good bargains to be had.
Equipment stuff. It's 9 o'clock in the morning from Foster Auctions.
Okay. My wife would probably, if I brought any more hammer, for 1980s through early 2000s, I would go to Hampest, the mother of all Hampest in Dayton, Ohio. I would go there with some buddies and bring home boat anchors, great big old radios and stuff. You know what this cost when it was new? This was $25,000 it was new, and I got it for $10. And I finally realized a lot of that stuff I had gathered all those years, and I had great grandiose plans to do with it. I'm in the mode of getting rid of some of the stuff now. I also should mention, I normally go to 3 prepper meetings in the area. This one once a month. There's one bi-weekly down in Branson that Tom Sherry runs. That's tomorrow. And I'm not presenting tomorrow. I think Russ is going. Russ used to be a California Department of Corrections officer who got fed up with California and moved to Missouri. And now he's an emergency management director of a nearby county. And he's doing a presentation on intel from, he's privy to a lot of intel that we're not privy to. And he's told me that for the last few years, everything coming from the alphabet soup agencies, and they get stuff all the time, is all focused on the white violent extremist. And, if you have an NRA sticker on the back of your truck, you're one of them. Anyhow, he's doing a presentation on that tomorrow. I will probably take my laptop with me, and I'll probably send out an email to Tom tonight to tell his folks that if they want to bring their bopangs to that tomorrow. It's just off of 65, just this side of Branson. And you want to post a link, or email me that and ask me where it is, and I can give you direction to it. The third meeting that's once a month is in Roby, Missouri. Travis Maddox has a good YouTube. I don't know how he puts up 3 YouTubes a day, some 2 a day, sometimes 3 a day, called the Prepared Homestead. And they have a meeting once a month up in Roby, and they have 450 attend that sometimes. It's the one in Branson tomorrow's potluck and a meeting. The format's a little different. It's kind of a circle type thing. Everybody goes around and tells who you are, how much you want to give, and what you've been doing to prepare for since the last meeting, what you're willing to share. And then usually there's some kind of a presentation, and they eat potluck. You don't have to potluck, so about probably half of the people bring something to share for potluck, and half don't. And the one in Roby's potluck also, but they have a lot of local vendors and stuff selling stuff. A lot of kids, a lot of dogs, and the Roby's a bit more of a drive for me, but I find a lot of times it's worthwhile going up there. But anyhow, anything else? Maddox? M-A-D-D-O-X, I think.
The Prepared Homestead.
Yeah, just YouTube The Prepared Homestead. And shoot me this and say you want my list of known area regional preparedness meetings and resources. And I have all those on there. There's coming up later this year, at the Webster County Fairgrounds. It's a big 2-day event. It's well worth going to. I have some other stuff on there too, but I've got my email. I said anybody who knows of any more or has corrections, shoot me an email. My email address is on that. So anyhow, I probably prattled on too long.
No, you're good. Real quickly, I got just a couple of other announcements we're going to make, but we ran out of slips to put in the drawing. So if you tried to get into the drawing, but we didn't have any more white sheets of paper, you can go put your name in it real quickly right now, because in just a minute or two we're going to be drawing. A couple of things. I want to talk just a minute. We've got about 15 minutes before our scheduled ending time. Tornadoes. This past week has been Severe Weather Awareness Week. If you lived in Greene County, we had, or actually it was a statewide thing, but at 10 o'clock Wednesday we had the tornado warnings. As people who are prepared for things, sometimes we focus on the big, huge events, end of the world as we know it, and we forget about the things that happen all the time. And in Southwest Missouri, every year there are tornadoes that come through this area. Have you thought about what you're going to do? The number one thing you need to do to be prepared for a tornado is to have a plan of where you're going to go. A plan where you're going to go in your home, maybe the basement, it may be a tornado shelter, it may be a bathroom or whatever, but a place also where anytime you have a place where you spend lots of time. For example, where do we spend lots of time? Other than the house. Work. Do you have a plan of where you're going to go at work? Hopefully your job has a tornado plan, but do you know where it is you're supposed to go? Make sure you do, okay? If you spend a lot of time in church or some other location, have an idea of where you would go if the tornado warning went off. I used to be a mall cop back in my college days and worked at Battlefield Mall. Battlefield Mall has tornado shelters. They're back corridors and that type of thing, but you know what? No customer wanted to go to those tornado shelters when the alarm went off. Where did they want to go? They wanted to go to those big glass entryways and stand there between the two entryways and look outside and look for the tornado. Well, I guarantee you, if you get your wish, if you're going to see a tornado standing at those big glass doors, you're also going to get something else you didn't vote for, okay? But anyway, it's important that you have a plan. Obviously, other things that may be important in a tornado would be some water or food, electrical sources, energy sources, lighting, those types of things. but it's most important that you have a plan of where you're going to go and what you're going to do. What if you're driving down the highway? What do? Tornado's coming. It's coming at you.
You get in a ditch.
Drive faster, right? Okay. Turn around, go the other way. The correct answer there, most experts would say, you want to find a ditch nearby that's low. You want to get out of your vehicle because those tornadoes will toss a vehicle like a tin can. And you want to get in a low-lying ditch that is not prone to flooding, by the way. You don't want to be caught away in the water there and drown, but a low-lying ditch. But start thinking through those things. That's this time of year, March, April, and May, and it's important you kind of get those things in mind. What's that? Overpass, another great thing to get under an overpass, absolutely. The May topic, by the way, May topic is not listed on your page, so if you want to write this down, I do have our 2 May topics. I'm going to be speaking. I'm going to actually do 2 topics that I've done in the past. One of them I did about a year and a half ago, and the other one I did about 3 years ago, way at the very beginning. So hopefully we'll do that. But we're going to do, the one I did about 3 years ago was about fresh air, and talking about what came to mind for me was when I was building my shelter, I priced online what is a chemical, biological, nuclear, radiological, CBRN air filter cost. Those are about like $5,000 if you want to buy one that'll give you fresh air for your shelter. But you can build one for a couple of $100. And there's a book out there called Emergency Air, and I've taken that information, adjusted it a little bit, and even improved upon it since the last time I talked. But we're going to talk in May. Again, these are the May topics. The second Friday, whatever the second Friday is. We're going to talk about fresh air and how you can build your own air filter for your home. But the other topic comes up because we had numerous questions about it tonight. Even Alan talked about it, was Faraday cages. And we've talked about Faraday cages again before, but we continue to have lots of questions. And a Faraday cage in general is to protect our electronic devices in case we have something, an EMP or a solar flare, those types of things that would ruin our electronics. You can put them in a Faraday cage and protect them. And I've got some really low-cost plans for Faraday cages. And so we'll talk about Faraday cages and fresh air in our May meeting.
What's in April?
April, that's a great question. That's where I was going. And April is canning, so we're going to talk about food preservation, particularly canning. And again, I think this is a great skill that everybody needs to learn. You need to learn what supplies you're going to need to do it. Supplies aren't super expensive, but what supplies you're going to need to do it and how you're going to do it. And Carol's going to talk to us next month about that.